rain and possibly a thunderstorm in the morning. And then starting to clear up slowly during the day. The winds will start to diminish. They'll still be over 35 miles per hour during the day. 100% chance of another 3/4 to 1 inch of rain on Monday. Tuesday, sunshine and 42. Wednesday, sunshine and 41. Thursday, sunny and 35. Friday, sunny and 47. And next Saturday, mostly sunny with a high of 45 degrees.
We're here for you on the Talk of the Valley. ON Radio.
Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
What happens when professional law enforcement goes head-to-head with a poltergeist? What happens when a lifelong belief system is smashed in one day? Where do you turn?
Welcome to the the 1025th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WOON AM FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live and on YouTube. That was Ben and Paulino, and I'm Matt Moniz, here to help things along. Paul is with us too, coming via live Skype.
Hello, everyone. Over the years, we have spent many hours on this show talking about my experiences working with Ed and Lorraine Warren, particularly in the now famous Lindley Street poltergeist case of 1974 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. But we have never been able to bring you anyone else who was any closer than a huge crowd outside the house. Today, that changes. Officer Joseph Tomek was one of the first people I met when Ed Warren and I walked into that little bungalow in the early afternoon of Sunday, November 24th, 1974. Over the past year, Joe and I have become reacquainted and have spent time together. I continue to be impressed with his integrity and his quest for the truth. Now, after nearly 50 years, Joe Tomek, now retired and living far from Bridgeport, appears on the radio to share his remarkable experiences.
So Joseph Tomek, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Hey guys, glad to hear you and happy to have this occasion to speak to you and to the other people in Bridgeport and others throughout the world who may be listening.
Well, it's honestly, it's historic to have you with us, and we really appreciate you taking your time to be with us. And we'll I know it probably doesn't feel like it to you, Joe, but to us it is. So we'll get right to it. So Joe, as you know, this has been called the best documented poltergeist case in history. So please tell us about your experiences on Lindley Street on those days in 1974. And we'll ask you a few questions from there. So let's just start with the case.
Well, back then, it was a Sunday morning, and I was taken out of my normal car, a one-man car, and put in a two-man car with my partner at that time was Carl Leonzi. Now, it was a Sunday morning, and nothing really that much is supposed to happen on Sunday mornings. Well, anyways, about 11 o'clock in the morning, time for us to have our second cup of coffee, the call came over the radio, the police radio, sending us a detailed answer to call on Lindley Street. And we were sort of upset. That's not really our post. That's the car that should have been the police car next to us. Anyways, we went over there, and that gave us very little information over the radio, just to go to that address and see the woman who would answer the door, and she would explain to you the reason we were sent there. Again, no information. what kind of case it was and so forth, and rang the doorbell, and she answered it, and she says, "Oh, thank God you're here. We need your help." And I said, "Sure, no problem. What's the matter?" She says, "Well, follow me." And apparently at this time, like I said, we didn't know what type of case it was, and she assumed we had already been told by this dispatcher what type of case it was, and well, we knew nothing. So I kind of followed her, and Carl at this time was still waiting out on the front porch. And well, as she was leading me to the kitchen, I noticed on the other side of the kitchen that her husband and a little child, not a little child, a child was sitting in there, apparently waiting for us to come in. Well, anyways, he starts leading us to the kitchen, and I noticed there was a television set mounted to one of the walls there. And as we came in, the television, first of all, came off the drawer or whatever it was mounted on, came off, sort of floated through the air, very slow, and stopped in front of my face a few inches away from me. Now, I was kind of stunned at this point, didn't know what to say, but thinking, oh, this has still got to be part of a come on or something. Anyways, it came there, sat in front of my face, did a little dance, and then suddenly fell to the floor. Well, she says, well, stuff like that always happens here. And, well, still didn't know what it was on, thought it was part of like a come on or something. I picked it up, it was still working, and put it back on the shelf. Anyways, she led me at the other end of the hallway to the kitchen. There was her main bedroom, I guess. And she brings me in there, and the room is just torn apart, like all the drawers and closets torn out and emptied on the floor, the clothes in the closets torn up, the bed torn apart. I mean, actually half pulled off the bed. This is a king-size bed, too. And she says, this always happens there. You fix it up, it's always happening again. I know, you got to help us. Well, I said, well, no problem. This is exactly what anybody's home who had ever been burglarized, especially during the daytime or so, where they go in and search everything, every place, looking for money, jewelry, and stuff like that. So I assumed it was that. Was the whole thing was about. And said, no, this always happens like that. You fix it up, you come back 10 minutes later, it's the same way. So she continues on now. Now Carl came up behind us and gave a little explanation to him about it. And she started leading me through the house to show me the other rooms and what was happening, the messes in the kitchen and other rooms where people might hide stuff and stuff like that, looking for, wealth. Anyways, again, not thinking much that, oh, somebody in the family's doing this stuff. Who else, And I said, well, a 10-year-old girl. Then we were introduced to Marcy. She was a daughter or goddaughter of the woman who was showing us, and Mrs. That was what was her name now? Laura Gooden, and her husband came out, Jerry. He came out with her also, and welcomed us there and started telling us the story. Well, this went on so we just to the house and everything, and other smaller things were happening, noises in different bedrooms and nobody in there, and stuff like that. A couple dishes falling that had been washed earlier in the morning had fallen on the ground. And at that time, Mr. Warren, he said, he says, this has been going on for quite a while. Well, at that time, we still assumed it was something new that would have been happening in the house. He says, no, he explained at the time that Marcy was an adopted girl that they had gotten after their original son had passed away earlier. I think at that time he couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. And these folks were kind of on the end of the age system where it was easier, it would be more difficult for the adopt a new young-born baby. So they explained that Miss Gooden originally had been born in the Indian tribe up in Canada and spent most of her life there. And that to be sure that they were able to adopt a child, they was suggested that she try to adopt a Canadian baby from one of the Indian tribes, which she did and succeeded. And by this time, the Marcy, the baby, she was already 10 years old. So she would probably be the only person she ever knew as mother and father were the couple she was living with now. And this went on, and we were more or left to see the house, the rest of the house at a time. At this time, car Green 23, which was the car that should have been responsible for taking the call, arrived on scene to see what was going on. And we got a call, I was told to call the police station on the police radio, and to find out they were interested in what was going on. The dispatchers up there. So I explained to them and told them that the assistant police car had arrived, and well, we got back to them. At this time, they told us, be careful. You make no reference to what call you're on or what's going on or any names over the police radio. Any correspondence that's going to follow up, you need assistance or help or information, you had to do it through a telephone, nothing over the air, so people could listen in and get nosy and start showing up. It seemed at that time the gift that everybody wanted was a police radio, listen on to what was going on in town. Well, anyways, I said to Paul George Wilson and Leroy Lawson, who were the new officers there, to follow them around. We show them around the house and explain what was going on. And we sort of left, the rest of the company was there, the owner's home, and a few of the personal guests had started to arrive at the house. And they were in the kitchen. So we're going into the the kitchen area first. It was the closest room. And I'm talking to the two officers. I'm trying to explain to them, I think this is a big, come on, this stuff has not really happened. This is made to happen to attract attention and stuff. So I says, anything you see, take with heart that there's probably a put on somehow, that these must be very clever people. So now we're in the kitchen, and the kitchen table was in the middle of the room, and the other two officers were on the one side of the table. No, other three officers, my partner also was with them. And I was alone on one side of the table, explaining to all, this is put on, don't believe what you see, whatever. So, okay, all of a sudden, the officers are getting upset at me for talking. They're trying to wave me off and kicking the table and stuff like that. I said, what's the matter? Come on, believe me, it's a big put on. They go, turn around. And there it is, right behind me, this huge white refrigerator, two-door refrigerator, is just about a foot off the ground and sort of swaggering, the way I'm shaking my hands and making noise, and Turner's doing the same thing, imitating me. Okay, at that time, this lasted maybe only 15 seconds. At the time, it settled down, and that was it. And I guess I better shut up and say nothing more about it. Well, that went on, and I said, "Come on, we're not just leaving here." We tried moving the refrigerator around, seeing what was under it, and so forth and so on, and couldn't find anything wrong with it. Well, this stuff sort of kept going on, and small stuff like this. And the folks, I guess some of their family have been notified that stuff was happening, so they arrived down at the Goodens home to give their assistance in what they could. And at this time, Mrs. Gooden had been complaining that I guess it was that television set that fell down on in front of me had also happened to her sometime during that morning, and that it hit her foot and it was swollen up and it bothering her. She's limping around. So I said at this time, well, we have to get the city ambulance down there. City ambulance in Bridgeport at that time had a regular doctor working on it from all shifts, not some kind of medical assistant or so. And it took some while to get them down there. And finally, go on talk. And I started walking around the house again with a couple of officers. Somebody wanted to point out something to show me. And we walked by the living room where we earlier had seen Marcy and a couple of friends watching television from it. And as we walked across the room, Marcy in a huge custom chair sofa, sleeper sofa, with her sitting in it, holding a cat, came flying across the room from the other side of the other side of the room where they were sitting, and stopped in front of me, and quickly, and the two almost fell out between the cat and her. So I said to her, "Wow, what a trick! How'd you do that?" At that time, trying to get information from her, hope she'd say something wrong. And she says, "I don't know. It just happened." And I tried to make conversation. I said, "Ooh, who's the cat? I have a cat too." And she mentioned the name Stam, and she says, "That's the only friend I have. Nobody likes me. Nobody likes me at all. She's my friend." At that time, her father, who had seen the incident happen, and along with one of the, I think it was Leroy, one of the police officers, had also caught on what was happening. And her father stepped in between us and says, "Yeah, let me tell you about her." And he stated how, earlier in the year after school had started, because now we're talking about we're at the end of November, and that while the child was walking to school, which was maybe only a 3-block walk from where her school was, and she was stopped by one of the kids from school, a boy, a big boy. It was sort of a brutal little kid, not picking on people, had stopped and beat her and says, you look ugly, you look funny." I guess between her Indian heritage, she just carried around the look on her face and so forth, and beat her up. And that kid actually wound up in the hospital for that night and a couple of days later due to the injuries, and she was afraid to go to school anymore because of this. And she wouldn't go to school. And well, anyways, father went on and complained, yeah, she's been keeping her home because she's afraid to go to school. You can't force her to go, and she's still going to the doctor for treatment to her injuries. Well, anyways, settled down, and fathers again was saying how, you know, this is something fairly new that was happening, but it's just funny stuff like this started happening in the house too, and the child become more dependent on the family, afraid of a lot of stuff. And at that time, he was working in a factory in Bridgeport as either a lead man or a supervisor of some kind. And he was started getting calls from home all the time. You have to come home. We can't handle this. We need help. And he would do that. And then I guess his co-workers knew somewhat of what was going on, and everybody was making fun of him and stuff like that. And it became a problem all over. And at this time, the ambulance case showed up and did an examination of the woman and said, you know, she needs to go to the hospital where they could take some x-rays and stuff. And she refused to leave to go with them. And I got to the headquarters again, know by phone that what was going on, and they said, well, just stay there. Well, now this was a weekend, that a Sunday afternoon, and the platoon captain on shift at that time, because the patrol division normally had about 25 cars out on patrol during a normal shift. This was 2-man and 1-man cars, and well, we had a substitute lieutenant or a lower officer, then the captain conduct lineup and roll call. And anyways, where was the captain? He's a big shot to all the calls and the decisions. Well, he's down there in New Jersey watching the New York Giant football game. And that kind of peed us off. Here we are working Sunday, and he's watching a football game, probably free tickets. Well, now a couple of sergeants who were also patrol district sergeants started showing up because there was more information was getting to them from supervisors who were at work at the police station and what was happening. And now we're getting calls that what's happening. Our calls being on one of New York stations, the radio stations, the 24-hour news stations in New York City, giving a hour by hour detailed report of what's going on in Bridgeport. And that seemed to take importance for everybody. And the cars started showing up from the area, New York area, and trying to find the address. And it became out of hand a little bit, and large crowds started detailing outside the home. There were a couple hundreds at a time, and thousands. And they had to shut down the streets from that area of town. And we were told just to stay there, you know, keep things under control. And at the same time, I had requested the ambulance to the home. I asked that they send down a fire department, so check the house for any dangerous conditions that may be on, or maybe if anything was vandalized or purposely damaged or something that created another condition. And they did. Sent one unit down, a large unit, probably 7, 8 fire officers, and also the fire chief himself showed up in his car. And I explained to the chief now what was happening, what people were claiming, like the firemen to do while they were there is go through the house from top to bottom, looking for dangerous stuff, and also anything that shouldn't be there, like to set up things to happen like were happening, things being thrown around and noise and stuff like that, and which they did, and particularly look around under and side and inside and outside that refrigerator to see if anything there was normal. And they did that, and he's coming around, with me, and he says, whoops. And also the homeowner was there with the fire chief explaining to him what was here, what was there, anything that might be wrong or whatever. And fire chief comes up to me in front of all his people there, all his men, told the who was ever the captain of the fire truck itself was there. He says, I want all your men out of that house. I do not allow them to go in the house for any reason at all. If they try to send them home, they're finished here. Which he did, which kind of surprised me. Well, anyways, things went back in the house. A few more people showed up. There's some politicians try to use some excuses, but so the police officers would let them walk in, walk around, and so forth and so on. And I wouldn't let them do that, and they were kind of insinuating, doing their position with the city or state of Connecticut, so they should be the right to go in. And anyways, we turned them away, and we were told just to stay there till the end of the day.
Well,
And,
Joe, I'm going to have to pause you right there for a second. Unfortunately, we got to take our bottom of the hour break here, but we'll get right back to it in just a little bit.
Okay.
You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, with Matt Moniz as well, talking about the Bridgeport poltergeist case of 1974 with the only other surviving witness besides my dad, Joe Tomek, and we will be right back.
Introducing Bowling for Milk. Join your friends and neighbors at Walnut Hill Bowling Lanes on Sunday, December 10th from 2 to 5 p.m. for strikes, spares, and maybe a few gutter balls, but plenty of fun at Bowling for Milk. Just $25 gets you 2 strings of bowling and shoe rental, and the milk fund gets half. To add to the fun, we'll have a mini auction for just those in attendance, including an item donated by the New England Patriots. And ON Radio's Cruisin' Bruce Palmer will be on hand to spin the tunes and sign autographs. The Patriots don't play that week, so join us for Bowling for Milk, Sunday afternoon, December 10th from 2 to 5 p.m. at Walnut Hill Bowl on Diamond Hill Road, Woonsocket. It's a party to help the Milk Fund.
ON Radio.
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
Welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, featuring Matt Moniz. We are talking about the Bridgeport poltergeist case of 1974 with retired police officer Joe Tomek, and we were talking, Joe, about or you were explaining to us, the politicians are showing up, they're trying to get in, the police department the fire department pulled out, there's crowds forming in the street, the media is starting to get involved. Now, please continue where you were. You were at the house after turning away all the politicians.
Well, like I said, at this time, the fire chief also mentioned to me, he says he wanted to know if it was okay if I would let another priest in the house. And he explained that this priest was a local priest from the closest church. He was also the fire department chaplain. So I said, sure, of course, let him in. And someone went down to the rectory and picked up the police officer and brought him to the scene. Brought the priest to the scene. And he was given a tour of the building by the fire chief himself, and whatever, he looked around, spoke to me, and it was time for them to go. And he He, people started leaving, then he saw me. He said, Joe, come on in the room. I want to give you a blessing. And apparently he was blessing other people in the building, officials and so forth. And I said, no, that's not necessary. He said, oh, yeah, come on, you have to come in here. And he takes me to this little side room there where it's a sofa, another television set, and stuff like that, a little personal room. And he says, okay, just stay here for a minute. And he reaches into his vest and takes out a little bottle of holy water and a little prayer book with some prayers in it. I guess they use for officiating stuff and stuff, events and stuff like that. And he puts it on the table in front of him, on the coffee table in front of him, while he sits down looking for some other stuff. And he reaches over to pick up the bottle of holy water, and it just skirts away to the other by itself, to the other side of the coffee table. And again, he looks, makes a face, and reaches over again to on the other side of the coffee, and thing skirts away to the other side all by itself, and just probably moving a distance of 2.5 feet or so, just out of his reach. So again, he goes, reaches back towards me. So I go to get it for him, to give it to him, and he yells, "Don't touch it! Don't touch it! Leave it alone!" Apparently, at this time, he gets the holy water and does his sacramental thing, or whatever they call it, a blessing and stuff. And again, at this time, I was thinking, this is all real now. What's happening? This isn't a put-on thing, because it's things that were happening. People will never tell you probably have scientists and musicians and stuff trying to cause something to happen like this, but you couldn't unless you were a real show person or something. And again, I said, well, during the time, the other supervisors who had come to the house, and before they left, said to me, Joe, write a good report. Make it a good report, which meant don't fool around with it. Just put everything that happens in it. I don't know, something like this, a lot of times stuff that would become public, you keep it for more personal use, let them know. Because again, by this time, we were ready to go home. Again, our relief car would have taken us just at the end of the shift. It was not available because we still had it at the scene of the original call, and there were no spare cars that they could use to come out. So we had to wait for them to get a ride, the relief crew, come in and take over for us. And so we arrived back at the police station probably close to 5 o'clock, 5:30 versus 3:30. And this particular day, it was November 25th or so. It was my daughter's birthday, and they were having her birthday party, which they expected me to be at, and I was tied up here at this other call. So we were impatient to get home, get dressed, and attend the party. And I was thinking at this time, this is something that the police department or anybody else is going to be able to hide or deny was happening or so. Too many witnesses. And so this was the last day of a day shift that we're on, and we would be off for 3 days before coming back on the evening shift, afternoon shift. So I said, well, before all my notes and everything that I had been taking in the past, I said, I'm going to write the report at home where I had a wife who could type it out for me rather than me pick and pack trying to make the thing go. And then wrote out a report and put in exactly what I wanted to, regardless. Okay, well, 3 days later, we show up for the second shift roll call, And here's my captain up here who's at the football game. He hasn't known what's been going on. And I imagine, well, when we left the scene, New York television stations, the other television stations, were already on the scene with their trucks and their towers, transmission towers up, and they were making reports, shooting what was happening live during their news programs. So again, I said, too many people involved are with the knowing what's going on. I made a good report. Well, after roll call, the captain says, "Okay, you guys," he named 4 of us in my room after roll call. So we go in there, and he said, "I want to make the reports. I want them." So, I already had my report ready because I was going to be the one who's responsible for the main reports out of that, handling that call. I gave it to him. He reads it. He looks at it. He says, "You don't expect me to accept that, do you?" I said, "No, sir. I really didn't, because normally you wouldn't turn something in like that." Well, like I said, too many witnesses. So I said to him, I said, "No, sir, I'll change the report. I'll make a new report. But you tell me what to say and what I can't say." At that time, he kind of blew his top, threw me out of the office, ordered me out on patrol, and that was it. And at that time, I heard nothing more about it. And I said, "No, this is too important case, this type of case to be, for them to just trash it, hide the thing." And, well, eventually I says, there has to be some kind of story coming out, because the whole thing about it to me was, here was this 10-year-old kid, and things like this were never really happening. Or if they were happening, when parents were advised at that time, "Well, take the child to your doctor, your family doctor or child's doctor, explain what's happening, and see if they can help you or advise you." And at that time, nobody, we're a small city outside New York City, or 60 miles from New York City, and there was never heard of a doctor that type around here. And I said, this is happening probably all over quite often, because find out later from the experts and other doctors that this is a common thing that a lot of especially children, female children, that were experiencing it, had experiences. So, and it was a real thing that needed to be looked into to see what might have been real happenings, and what was created happenings, false things that they claimed all kids went through this at one time in life or not. And I kind
Joe?
of was more concerned about them washing it out and saying this was a medical type thing. And it wasn't.
Joe, did you mention what happened to you when you were alone in the house?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I said just before we left the house to be relieved by the other squad, I said I wanted to go through the house one more time to make sure everything was still okay in its place. And and make sure all the doors were locked, the windows were locked and closed. No one had been in that house since I had left there when we were making the inspection of the house before I was going to leave the house. And just before I left the house, I'm trying to say no. I'm saying, okay, now this is really happening. I pulled. It was real. It was more like a joke to me. I said, okay. I kindly said quietly, okay, if you're in here, because nothing was out of place in that room or anything at this time. He says, make something happen. Well, on the dresser next to the door, there was this game-type board game of some kind, with sort of the size of a checkerboard, but not a checkerboard for sure. Or little figurines, plastic dolls, or maybe metal dolls, or figurines, like square dancing type figures you see. Well, they all started jumping around, dancing around on that board, and I said, "Okay, you can stop now." And immediately they stopped, and I made an apology to who was ever in that room causing all this to happen, saying, "I apologize that you people are real. I wish you had honored you more. Please forgive us." So there, and I will always remember this and say, you people, whether you be ghost from heaven or hell or whatever, you're real, and I would spread that information that, yeah, this stuff really does happen. And not for all doctors and other people, radio broadcasters and television broadcasters and guests that they usually have in their programs, that's the stuff. No, just don't write off everything. Investigate before you call everything a hoax. And that was mainly a big part of my, I put a lot of that stuff in that book. I said I wouldn't change a word in that book. They would have to order me to do it, and they would take responsibility.
So what was your...
And finally, you know, and I have to mention this, that years later, a neighbor of theirs, a childhood neighbor of the family from that time, who passed the house every day, got a hold of me, found some, by this time, this was 40 years later, more than 40 years later, said, "Did that stuff really happen?" And explained why. And he was now a part-time writer and stuff that, yeah, it did. And he was trying to convince himself and whatever, because he also knew the people, or knew the child at least at that time, because they would have been at the same age. And yeah, and I said I kept one piece of report. The police officers are supposed to, at the end of the career, get rid of everything, but I kept one. And he said, "Could you send it to me?" And that's a letter that's still out there in several of the books and programs. And that's what just kind of started the whole thing off, where people now became interested, and that's where I guess we are today.
So let me ask you this, Joe. What was your experience with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and my dad as well? What were your first impressions, and how did that sort of unfold?
Again, this was, to me, it was planned. I mean, the people, I have to explain this. When Ed and Lavinia Warren, the priest involved, and a couple others involved, I think, well, when they showed up, apparently somebody had made a call when they're calling the police at the same time. Had made a phone call to the Warrens and saying, yeah, stuff's going on at the house. And all these people were up at the house that day for some outing they were having, a meeting about stuff that was going on. And the house was in a couple towns over from Bridgeport. So they all showed up, and when this was like closer to 2 o'clock when they were showing up, and like I said, we had been there since noontime at the time, and it was like a parade walking in through the front door, you know, and I had the feeling that no, they had been there before. I mean, they looked too comfortable just walking in like a six-man parade, going right to the kitchen where the Goodens were seated with the guests that showed up earlier, I guess brother and stuff and everything. Well, there was another thing this as well. This was when I first appeared at the house, and Mr. Gooden was talking about the problems they were having in the house, and he had said, you know, this had been going on for more than just today. It's been going on for maybe months. He said that this was on Saturday. He says things had gotten so bad in the house with things being set, and he figured it was dangerous for everybody there, so he had to get the people out of the house. He was afraid to stay there for the night, and he says I took him up to West Point, and I'm thinking, West Point? Why you bring the 10-year-old up to West Point? And I later found out, well, this is where his brother lived, a little town, whatever West Point was located at. And he said they had to come back on that Sunday because they were concerned what was happening at the house, and also they never missed Mass on Sunday, church on Mass. And they got there and they found the house destroyed and everything in it, and they said, okay, I guess time to get the police involved. And there's also another point that when we were first there, and I was looking around the outside of the home and the homes next to us, see what kind of property again. A fellow who lived across the street from him, he was also a police officer, and he had lived there for all their life and knew those people. John Hellsworth, I think it was his name was at the time. He says, Joe, whatever you see here is it's really happening. These are good people. They're not fools. They're not into any kind of stuff there. I've known them and the kids since they lived there, since they've been little baby. And he said, this really happens here. So don't let anybody persuade you it doesn't happen here. And I said, thank you very much. And, never really got back to him many times because we were different squads, and it would be really whenever we crossed each other again. So that kind of reinforced me. And apparently he kept it private, his private business, neighborhood business, and never got the police involved with it at any time till then, as far as I know.
Well, there were four of us who arrived about 2 o'clock. Father Bill Charbonneau, Anna Lorraine Warren, and me. I remember you were one of the first people I met, Joe.
Yeah. And I come to that time you were still wearing your collar. Because you explained to me that you were a student up with her at seminary.
I was in regular street clothes, but I was a student for the priesthood. So, Father Bill was in his collar.
Similar
Whatever
hairstyles,
happened
though.
to him? Did he ever make any, I'm sure, to his supervisors at the time, did he ever make any reports on?
Not that I'm aware of. Nothing major.
Yeah, because
Like
didn't
I
they
say,
didn't they get in touch with the Bishop of Bridgeport? What actually is Bridgeport
yeah.
diocese? Yeah, and they tried to authorize
Yep.
an exorcism, I believe, correct?
Yes. Never heard back.
Oh, look at it now.
Yeah.
One question I'd like to know from you, Joe. From this case, what was the biggest impact it had personally to you?
Just notice everything you hear is something at some point believe that investigated as being a true fact or so before you just throw it in the trash, something like that. No matter how ridiculous it sounds or whatever, because now you find, as history goes on, you're finding out that these people who go around, I don't know, become crazy or crazy and stuff, or wind up shooting people and killing people, and they've been mentioned for years or so that they're going to do something like that. Some of them wind up doing it.
Well, on a similar note, we received a question from a listener, someone who writes into us a lot, Phil from Savannah, who asked us, which you might be able to input on this, Joe, but essentially the question goes as, I always wondered what happened to Marcia in the years after the ordeal. I read that she went back to Canada when she was 18. Has anybody been able to track her down? What a fascinating interview that would be.
As far as I know, no. 'Cause I've consistently, since that day, tried to find everything I could read about the case and her, and nothing. Again, by this time, I guess from the scene or whatever, she was taken to somebody on a higher level, doctor level, for examination. And no, if every, I'm sure reports were made of it, and they exist somewhere. Especially, I find out in other states, probably Connecticut too, that any child or so under a certain age who's taken a mental exam is requested of her for certain reasons, that the state had to make out a report of it. And if this was a state doctor or a state associate place or so, that there are reports about it. Also, again, this was a 10-year-old child at the school reporting. Well, she had to go to school someplace. She was brought to a Catholic school or whatever, public school. Board of Education has to have reports on, well, throughout her time in the school, what school she went to, what addresses she lived at. And at some point, she had to graduate from a high school, so there had to be a yearbook of her, like the kids make it with each other at the end of the year, with friends in it. And so I said, her background just didn't disappear. She also had a driver's license in place, and maybe a marriage license in place, where and credit cards in some place where the places she lived. And I don't know, a good reporter who was interested in the case never had the knowledge of how to follow up on it. There's always some computer nerd someplace who's always able to crash into this computer system to get this kind of information.
Well, she died in
well, yeah, that was how many years later? The last reports we have her, she's 10 years old. So she lived another 30 years doing someplace, living someplace, being married, working someplace, having some kind of record behind her.
Well, her birth date would have put her around 1982, 83, being 18. And then she would have become an adult at some point and have graduated school. So there should be some kind of record.
Maybe a college too.
Yeah.
Yeah, someplace. And
Well, she
like I
died
say,
in 2015 at the age of 51 in Ohio.
Okay.
I'm saying there's a trail someplace. Maybe she's right there in Bridgeport listening to us right now.
Well, if she died
No, I
in
doubt
2015, then there would be a death record, and that would have her social security number, so you can track backwards that information if you wanted to.
It's true. We'd have to go to, according to this article you sent me, Dad, there was a coroner's report that said that I think it was from Richland County in Ohio that details a little bit of what's going on there. But she was pronounced dead of natural causes on February 10th of 2015 at Med Central Hospital in Shelby.
Okay, that's a starting
So
point.
I mean, we could always go back from there. But apparently, she changed her name. Well, sort of changed her name. So instead of going by Marcia, it was Marcia, also known as Marcia. So a little alias thrown in there. Maybe that has something to do with it too. But we are indeed out of time. But thank you for being with us today, Joe. It's wonderful talking to you again. And it's your thoroughness with how you explain everything. It just amazes me. each beat, it's honestly it's really impressive, and I really appreciate the detail because as someone who appreciates context, it's incredibly important. So thank you for being with us, Joe. Really, really, really appreciate it.
And I congratulate you for putting the show on. I say this is something that you just don't throw away. And again, these things you remember forever. One of those things.
Yeah, no,
Oh, yeah.
exactly. So I guess we'll start off with our announcements here. So we'll keep you on the line here, Joe, if you want. We'll say our goodbyes in a little bit. So to learn more about the Bridgeport Poltergeist, we refer you to The World's Most Haunted House by William J. Hall and our 2017 book, Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong. And there are a number of great books by our friend Nick Redfern as well, for sale temporarily at dowsersoutheast.com/Greater New England UFO Conference. There's also a link on the homepage of BehindTheParanormal.com.
And visit that website, BehindTheParanormal.com, where you can find nearly 1,200 hours of our regular shows and special broadcasts since 2008 from CBS Radio, Achieve Radio, and here on WOON AM and FM. Also hear many of the other great broadcasts here from major broadcast platforms, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.
And that does it, folks. So we'll catch you next time on
Return
Behind
to this
the
radio
Paranormal.
frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.